What happens when a lighthearted Hollywood star known for sarcasm and quick wit suddenly flips the script on live television and leaves one of daytime TV's most powerful voices momentarily speechless? It was supposed to be another cheerful segment on The View. Another celebrity stop on the promotional circuit. Cameras rolling, audience clapping, coffee mugs on the table, smiles everywhere. But what unfolded that morning would become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television. And if you love dramatic celebrity moments like this, make sure you subscribe to Stage View right now, hit that like button, and drop a comment below telling us what you think about this showdown. Because stories like this, they only get more intense as they unfold. The studio lights glowed warmly across the polished set of The View. The audience buzzed with anticipation as the familiar panel took their seats, each host ready for what they assumed would be another lively but routine celebrity interview. At the center of it all sat the legendary moderator, Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi leaned comfortably in her chair, the calm authority she carried on the show unmistakable. For decades, she had commanded conversations with a mix of humor, blunt honesty, and an ability to challenge her guests without hesitation. To her right sat veteran co-host Joy Behar, already exchanging jokes with the audience during the commercial break. Everything felt familiar, predictable, until the producers announced the next guest. Joining us today is the one and only Ryan Reynolds. The audience erupted. Ryan walked out with his trademark grin, half charming movie star, half mischievous comedian. The applause swelled as he waved casually, shaking hands with the hosts before settling into his chair. Ryan Reynolds had built an entire career on quick humor and playful sarcasm. Whether starring in blockbuster films or posting viral jokes online, he always seemed one step ahead of the conversation. But that morning, even he didn't quite know what kind of conversation he was about to step into. Whoopi opened the interview smoothly. "So Ryan, welcome back. It's good to see you again." Ryan leaned back slightly, smiling. "It's good to be here. I like the mugs. I'm assuming they're filled with something stronger than coffee." The audience laughed. Joy jumped in immediately. "Not before noon, honey." Ryan placed a hand dramatically over his heart. "Well, that's disappointing." The banter flowed easily at first. They discussed Ryan's latest film project, the long hours on set, the usual promotional questions. Ryan joked. The audience laughed. Everything looked normal. But then Whoopi shifted the tone. She glanced down briefly at her notes before looking back at Ryan with a slightly more serious expression. "You've had a fascinating career," she began. "Action star, comedy star, producer, businessman. But a lot of people also say you're very good at controlling the narrative around yourself." Ryan tilted his head slightly. "Oh, is that the polite way of saying I talk too much?" A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Whoopi didn't laugh. "I'm saying," she continued calmly, "that sometimes celebrities present one image publicly, while the reality behind the scenes can be very different." The audience quieted. Ryan's smile stayed in place, but it changed slightly. Subtle. Curious. "Oh wow," he said slowly. "We're starting spicy today." Joy leaned forward, sensing the tension. "Well, you know this show, Ryan," she said. "We like to ask the questions people are already talking about." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "I respect that. But something about the energy in the room had shifted." Whoopi leaned in just a little closer. "Some critics say your humor, your online persona, it's a way of deflecting serious conversations. That when difficult topics come up, you turn it into a joke." The audience murmured quietly. Ryan blinked once. He had faced tough interviews before. Journalists trying to catch him off guard. Critics questioning his public image. But this felt different. This wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. Ryan rested his hands on the table. "You're saying I use humor to avoid real conversations?" Whoopi nodded calmly. "Sometimes, yes." Ryan paused. The cameras zoomed slightly closer. A moment passed. Then he smiled again. But this time, the smile had a sharper edge. "Well," Ryan said slowly, "that's interesting coming from this table." The audience reacted instantly. A few surprised laughs. A few gasps. Joy raised an eyebrow. Whoopi's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Oh," she said. Ryan leaned forward now, mirroring Whoopi's posture. "You're saying I hide behind humor sometimes," he continued. "But let's be honest, this show has mastered the art of turning serious issues into entertainment too." The audience murmured louder. That was not the direction the conversation usually went. Whoopi remained calm. We're here to talk about issues people care about, she replied. Ryan nodded. I know, and you do it well. But sometimes the conversation feels less like discussion and more like a courtroom. A ripple moved through the crowd. Joy looked toward Whoopi, clearly intrigued. Ryan continued. I mean, think about it. Guests come here expecting a friendly interview, and suddenly they're defending their entire life philosophy before the first commercial break. Some audience members laughed nervously. Whoopi crossed her arms lightly. So you're saying we put people on trial? Ryan shrugged casually. I'm saying I might need a lawyer sitting next to me. Laughter burst from the audience. But the tension remained. Whoopi leaned back slightly, studying him. You knew what kind of show this is before you came. Ryan nodded. Of course. Then he paused. And what he said next made the room go completely still. But the real question is, are you ready when the guest starts asking the questions back? The audience gasped. Joy's eyes widened slightly. Even the camera operators seemed to shift. Because suddenly, the balance of the interview had changed. Ryan Reynolds wasn't just answering questions anymore. He was flipping the spotlight. And Whoopi Goldberg, a woman who had spent decades guiding conversations on television, now found herself on the other side of the table. Ryan looked directly at her. Curious. Calm. And since we're talking about public personas, he said gently, can I ask you something? The room fell silent. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. Go ahead. Ryan's voice stayed light, but the question carried weight. Do you ever feel like the pressure of hosting a show like this forces you to take positions you might not fully believe, just because the audience expects it? A stunned hush spread across the studio. The audience leaned forward. Joy looked back and forth between them. Because now, this wasn't just a celebrity interview anymore. It had become something else entirely. A confrontation of ideas. A battle of wit. And as the tension thickened in the air, one thing was becoming clear to everyone watching. Ryan Reynolds had just turned the tables on The View, and the conversation was only getting started. For a moment, the entire studio seemed to forget how to breathe. The bright lights of The View still shone across the table, but the warmth that usually filled the room had been replaced with something sharper, something electric. Every eye in the audience was now locked on two people, Ryan Reynolds and Whoopi Goldberg. Ryan's question still hung in the air like a suspended note in a piece of music, waiting for resolution. Do you ever feel like the pressure of hosting a show like this forces you to take positions you might not fully believe, just because the audience expects it? The audience shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward. Some exchanged glances. Because this wasn't the direction the show normally went. Guests answered questions. Hosts guided the conversation. But Ryan had flipped the script. And now everyone was waiting for Whoopi's response. Whoopi didn't react immediately. She sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the table, eyes studying Ryan with a calm intensity that only decades of live television could produce. Finally, she spoke. That's an interesting question, she said slowly. Her voice remained steady, but there was a new seriousness in it. Let me ask you something first. Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly. Sure. Whoopi leaned forward. Do you think we come out here every day pretending to believe things? A few audience members clapped softly. Ryan smiled faintly. I think you come out here every day knowing millions of people are watching, he replied. Joy Behar shifted in her chair, watching the exchange closely. Ryan continued, his tone thoughtful rather than confrontational. That's a lot of pressure. And when there's pressure, there's performance. Whether it's acting, politics, or daytime television. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Whoopi's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in concentration. You're an actor, she said. You perform for a living. Ryan nodded. Absolutely. So how is that different? She asked. Ryan leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. Because when I'm acting, he said calmly, everyone knows it's a performance. The audience reacted with a mix of laughter and surprised murmurs. Joy leaned forward immediately. Wait a second, she said. Are you saying we're performing up here? Ryan raised both hands playfully. I'm saying this table is powerful. He gestured toward the hosts. You shape public conversations. You challenge people. You question them. Sometimes you even corner them. Joy smirked slightly. That's called interviewing. Ryan laughed softly. Fair enough. But then his expression became more thoughtful. But when someone challenges you back, suddenly it feels different, doesn't it? The audience reacted again, some clapping, others whispering. The tension had grown thicker. Whoopi studied Ryan carefully. She had interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years, politicians, actors, musicians, activists. Many had tried to push back. Few had done it this calmly, or this confidently. "You're very good at this," she said. Ryan grinned. "Deflection." "No," she replied. "Turning a conversation." The audience laughed. Ryan nodded. "That might be my superpower." Joy shook her head with amusement. "Well, let's turn it back for a moment," she said. "Because people watching this show know you for the jokes, the sarcasm, the charm. But sometimes critics say that charm lets you avoid tougher conversations." Ryan's smile faded slightly. Not completely, but just enough for the cameras to catch. "And what kind of conversations are those?" he asked. Joy leaned forward. "Serious topics. Social issues. Responsibility that comes with being a public figure." Ryan rested his elbows on the table now. "I talk about those things," he said. "But usually with humor," Whoopi added. Ryan nodded. "Yes. And that's exactly the point," Whoopi continued. "Some people feel humor softens issues that should be confronted directly." The audience murmured again. Ryan looked down at the table for a brief moment, then back up. "You know," he said slowly, "I grew up believing humor was one of the most powerful tools for talking about difficult things." A few audience members nodded. Ryan continued. "Sometimes laughter opens doors that anger just slams shut." The crowd responded with scattered applause. Whoopi listened carefully. "And sometimes," she replied, "laughter can distract people from the real issue." Ryan smiled slightly. "That's true too." For a moment, the conversation softened. But only for a moment. Because Ryan suddenly leaned forward again, his eyes meeting Whoopi's directly. "Can I ask you something else?" Joy laughed. "Wow, he's running the show now." The audience chuckled. Whoopi gestured with one hand. "Go ahead." Ryan took a breath. "When guests come on here," he said, "do you ever worry that the audience is already expecting you to challenge them?" Whoopi didn't hesitate. "Yes." The audience murmured in surprise at the blunt honesty. Ryan raised his eyebrows slightly. "You do?" "Of course," she replied. "People watch this show because they want real conversations. Not just promotion tours." Ryan nodded. "I respect that. But sometimes," Whoopi continued, "real conversations get uncomfortable." Ryan laughed quietly. "I'm starting to notice that." The audience laughed loudly. Joy shook her head. "You walked right into it." Ryan grinned. "Did I?" But then his tone shifted again, this time more serious. "Here's what I find fascinating," he said. "Actors come on shows like this, and they're expected to answer questions about politics, ethics, culture, everything." Whoopi nodded. "Yes. But hosts," Ryan continued gently, "rarely get asked the same level of personal questions." The audience reacted again, this time louder. Joy raised her hands. "Hold on. We talk about ourselves all the time." Ryan smiled. "You do. But you're still the ones asking the questions." The room fell quiet again. Ryan leaned back slightly. "So today," he said calmly, "I thought maybe we could switch roles for a minute." Joy laughed loudly. "Oh, this is dangerous." Whoopi folded her hands together. "All right," she said. Ryan tilted his head. "You've interviewed thousands of people," he said. "You've challenged their views. Pushed them to explain themselves." Whoopi nodded. "That's the job." Ryan's voice became softer now. "But who challenges you?" The audience went completely silent. The tension in the room had reached a new level. Because suddenly, the interview wasn't just about Ryan Reynolds anymore. It had become a reflection of the show itself. The cameras zoomed closer on Whoopi's face. For the first time since the conversation began, she paused longer than usual. Not defensive. Not angry. Just thoughtful. Ryan watched quietly. And then, with a calm smile, he added one final sentence that sent a ripple through the entire studio. "Because if we're talking about accountability, shouldn't it go both ways?" The audience erupted, some clapping loudly, others gasping in shock. Joy leaned back in her chair. "Well," she said, half laughing, half stunned, "this interview just turned into a philosophy class." But Whoopi wasn't laughing. She was looking directly at Ryan. And the expression on her face suggested something new. Not irritation. Not amusement, but challenge. Because in that moment, it became clear that the conversation between Ryan Reynolds and Whoopi Goldberg was far from over. In fact, it was about to become even more intense. The applause in the studio slowly faded, but the tension didn't. It lingered in the air like a charged current running through the set of The View. For years, the show had been known for fiery debates and unexpected confrontations. Politicians had stumbled under pressure. Celebrities had struggled to defend their views. But this moment felt different. Because now the conversation wasn't just heated. It was balanced on a knife's edge between two people who were both masters of the spotlight. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back slightly in her chair, studying Ryan Reynolds with the kind of calm focus that had defined her decades-long career. Ryan, meanwhile, sat relaxed but alert. His usual playful smile was still there, but behind it was something sharper now. The audience could feel it. This wasn't promotion anymore. This was a battle of perspectives. Whoopi finally spoke. "You're asking if accountability should go both ways," she said slowly. Ryan nodded. "Yes." She folded her hands together on the table. "Let me tell you something about sitting at this table." The audience quieted instantly. "Every single day," Whoopi continued, "we talk about issues that people across the country are arguing about. Politics, culture, social problems, things that affect millions of lives." Ryan listened carefully. "And when you talk about those things," she said, "someone will always disagree with you." A few audience members murmured in agreement. "That's part of the job," she finished. Ryan nodded respectfully. "I get that." Whoopi tilted her head slightly. "But here's what I want to understand," she said. "You're clearly comfortable challenging the system of an interview like this. So tell me honestly." She leaned forward just a little. "Why?" The question hung in the air. Ryan exhaled slowly, glancing briefly toward the audience before looking back at the hosts. "Because conversations matter," he said quietly. Joy Behar leaned forward again, curiosity replacing the earlier amusement. Ryan continued. "When people sit across from each other on television, it shouldn't feel like one side has all the power." The audience nodded. "It should feel like a discussion," he added. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "You don't think this is a discussion?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Sometimes it is." Joy laughed. "And sometimes it's a grilling." The audience laughed too. Ryan pointed playfully at Joy. "Exactly." But then he grew serious again. "Look, I understand why this format exists," he said. "You're asking questions that viewers want answered." Whoopi nodded. "That's right." Ryan leaned forward again. "But there's something fascinating about how quickly public conversations turn into judgment." The audience grew quiet again. Ryan's voice stayed calm. "A celebrity says one wrong thing, and suddenly they're being dissected across social media, news panels, podcasts, and shows like this." Joy tilted her head. "That's called accountability." Ryan nodded. "Sometimes." He paused. "But sometimes it's just spectacle." The audience reacted with a mixture of claps and murmurs. Whoopi didn't interrupt. Ryan continued carefully. "I've been in this industry a long time. I've seen people build careers, and I've seen people lose them overnight because of one moment taken out of context." A few people in the audience nodded. "So when I come on a show like this," Ryan said, "I'm not just answering questions. I'm stepping into a spotlight that can amplify every word I say." Joy crossed her arms thoughtfully. "Well, welcome to our world." The audience laughed. Ryan grinned. "Fair point." Whoopi leaned forward again. "But here's where I challenge you," she said. Ryan nodded. "I'm ready." "Actors," she continued, "have enormous influence. Millions of followers. Massive platforms." Ryan listened carefully. "When you speak," she said, "people listen." Ryan nodded slowly. "That's true. So when you choose humor instead of direct answers about serious issues," Whoopi asked, "isn't that avoiding responsibility?" The audience murmured again. Ryan sat back slightly, thinking. Then he smiled, but this time the smile carried a hint of vulnerability. "You know what's funny?" he said. Joy smirked. "Hopefully something." Ryan chuckled. "Everyone assumes celebrities are experts on everything." The audience laughed. Ryan continued. "I'm an actor. I play characters. Sometimes I wear a red suit and make bad jokes while saving the world." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. "But suddenly," he added, "I'm expected to have the perfect answer to complex global issues." Whoopi nodded slowly. "That comes with fame." Ryan shrugged. "And that's the trap." Joy leaned forward. "What trap?" Ryan gestured lightly with his hands. "The trap of pretending we know more than we do." The audience quieted again. Ryan's tone grew more reflective. "Sometimes the most honest thing a public figure can say is, 'I don't know.'" A few audience members clapped softly. But Whoopi wasn't done. "And yet," she said, "you're here challenging the format of this show." Ryan nodded. "Yes. So you must believe in the power of conversations like this." Ryan smiled again. Absolutely. He leaned forward, his voice steady. But powerful conversations require something important. Joy raised an eyebrow. What's that? Ryan looked around the table before answering. Humility. The word hung in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. The audience watched closely as Whoopi absorbed the comment. Joy slowly nodded. Okay, she said. That's a fair point. Ryan relaxed slightly, but Whoopi's expression remained thoughtful. You're making an interesting argument, she said. Ryan tilted his head. Which is? That the entire system of celebrity interviews needs to evolve. Ryan smiled. Maybe. The audience murmured again. Whoopi leaned back, tapping her fingers lightly on the table. You realize, she said calmly, that millions of people watching this right now are probably debating who's winning this conversation. The audience laughed loudly. Ryan laughed too. Well, that's unfortunate. Joy grinned. Why? Ryan shrugged. Because conversations aren't supposed to have winners. The audience applauded. But then Ryan added something that shifted the tone once more. They're supposed to have understanding. The applause grew louder. Whoopi nodded slowly, acknowledging the point. But her eyes still held that spark of challenge. You're very persuasive, she said. Ryan smiled. Years of pretending to be other people. The audience laughed again. But just as the tension seemed to ease, Joy suddenly leaned forward with a mischievous grin. Okay, Ryan, she said. Ryan looked at her. Yes, if we flipped the script like you suggested, and you were the host of The View for one day. The audience leaned in. What question would you ask us? Ryan blinked once. The room grew quiet again. He looked around the table, at Joy, at the other hosts, and finally back at Whoopi. A slow smile appeared on his face. Oh, he said. That's easy. The audience waited. Ryan leaned forward, resting his hands on the table as the cameras zoomed closer. And then he asked a question that made the entire studio erupt with gasps. If your job is to challenge powerful voices. He paused. Who challenges yours when the cameras turn off? The audience exploded with reactions, gasps, applause, shocked laughter. Joy leaned back in her chair. Well, wow. But all eyes turned back to Whoopi. Because now the spotlight had fully shifted. And the question Ryan Reynolds had just asked was one the hosts of The View rarely had to answer themselves. The silence in the studio grew heavier, because everyone could feel it. The conversation had reached its most intense moment yet, and what happened next would determine how this unforgettable interview would end. The studio lights felt brighter than ever, not because they had changed, but because every person in the room suddenly felt the weight of the moment. The question from Ryan Reynolds still echoed through the set of The View. If your job is to challenge powerful voices, who challenges yours when the cameras turn off? The audience had reacted instantly, gasps, scattered applause, a ripple of stunned laughter. But now that noise had faded into something heavier. Silence. Every camera in the studio was now pointed toward Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi sat still, her fingers resting lightly against the table. Her face revealed almost nothing, but the pause itself said everything. Because moments like this rarely happened on live television. Guests pushed back sometimes. They joked. They dodged. But very few ever turned the entire format of the interview around on the hosts themselves. Ryan hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't attacked anyone. He had simply flipped the mirror. Across the table, Joy Behar let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head slightly. Well, she said, half amused, half stunned. That's not the kind of question we usually get. The audience chuckled nervously. Ryan raised his hands in mock innocence. Just doing my part to keep things interesting. Laughter rippled across the room again, easing the tension slightly. But Whoopi still hadn't answered. And the longer the silence lasted, the more dramatic the moment became. Finally, she leaned forward. Her voice, when it came, was calm, but deliberate. You want to know who challenges us? Ryan nodded. Yes. Whoopi looked out at the audience first. Everyone. The crowd murmured. Then she looked back at Ryan. Every day, she continued. The audience challenges us. The producers challenge us. The media challenges us. Ryan listened carefully. And believe me, she added with a slight smile, social media challenges us more than anybody. The audience laughed loudly. Ryan nodded. That's fair. But Whoopi wasn't finished. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands. But I'll tell you something else, she said. Ryan tilted his head. What's that? Whoopi held his gaze. The most important challenge we get comes from each other. She gestured toward the hosts sitting beside her. People think we just sit here agreeing all the time. Joy burst out laughing. Oh no, honey. The audience laughed with her. Whoopi smiled faintly. What they don't see, she continued, are the arguments we have off camera. Ryan raised his eyebrows. I believe that. The audience laughed again. Whoopi continued calmly. This table works because we don't all think the same way. Ryan nodded slowly. That's actually refreshing to hear. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. So now let me ask you something. Ryan smiled. Here we go. The audience chuckled. Whoopi leaned forward again, her voice quieter but more pointed. You came in today ready to turn the tables. Ryan shrugged lightly. Maybe. Why? She asked again. Ryan paused. This time, the answer took longer. He looked out toward the audience for a moment. Some were leaning forward in their seats, completely absorbed. Others sat frozen, waiting for the next line in what now felt less like an interview and more like a scene in a movie. Finally, Ryan spoke. Because conversations on television shape how people see the world. The audience grew quiet again. Ryan's voice was calm, but sincere. When people sit at home watching shows like this, he said, they're not just watching entertainment. He gestured around the studio. They're watching how we talk to each other. Whoopi nodded slowly. Ryan continued. And sometimes, the way we talk on television teaches people to fight instead of listen. The audience murmured softly. Joy crossed her arms thoughtfully. Ryan looked back at Whoopi. I didn't come here to start a fight, he said. I came here to have a real conversation. For the first time since the tension began. Whoopi smiled. Not a defensive smile. Not a sarcastic one. A genuine one. Well, she said, I think we've definitely had that. The audience erupted in applause. Ryan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Mission accomplished? Joy pointed at him. Oh no, you're not getting off that easy. The crowd laughed loudly. You walked into this lion's den, she continued. You're staying until the final bell. Ryan leaned back dramatically. I knew I should have brought a lawyer. The room exploded with laughter again. But something had changed. The tension that had once felt sharp and confrontational now felt different. Respectful. Even a little playful. Whoopi nodded toward Ryan. You know, she said, not every guest would have handled this conversation the way you did. Ryan smiled. That's because most guests are smarter than me. Joy laughed. Or more terrified. More laughter filled the room. But just as the moment began to settle, Whoopi leaned toward the camera. You know what the funny thing is, she said. Ryan looked curious. What? Whoopi gestured toward the cameras. This entire conversation is probably exploding online right now. The audience reacted instantly, cheers, laughter, knowing nods. And she wasn't wrong. Across social media, clips from the interview were already spreading like wildfire. Viewers were posting shocked reactions. Did Ryan Reynolds just flip the script on The View? Whoopi versus Ryan, who won? That might be the most intense celebrity interview I've seen all year. Some people praised Ryan's calm confidence. Others applauded Whoopi's composure under pressure. And millions more were simply fascinated by the rare sight of a guest turning the interview format upside down. Back in the studio, Ryan chuckled. Great, he said. My mom is definitely watching this. Joy smirked. Well, she should be proud. Ryan grinned. She usually just texts me. Why are you talking so much? The audience roared with laughter. But then Whoopi leaned forward once more, this time with a softer tone. You know something, Ryan? Ryan nodded. What's that? This is exactly what conversations are supposed to look like. The room quieted again. People disagreeing, she continued. People asking questions. People pushing each other to think a little harder. Ryan nodded slowly. Exactly. Whoopi smiled. And the fact that we can do it without yelling at each other, that's progress. The audience applauded loudly. Ryan extended his hand across the table. Well then, he said. Thanks for the conversation. Whoopi shook his hand. Thank you for the challenge. The audience rose into a standing ovation. Applause echoed across the studio as the cameras slowly pulled back, capturing the moment that would soon be replayed across television and the internet for days to come. A guest had come onto The View expecting to answer questions. Instead, he had changed the entire conversation. And by the time the credits rolled, one thing was clear. No one watching would forget the moment Ryan Reynolds turned the tables on Whoopi Goldberg. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think about this intense exchange? Did Ryan push the conversation in the right direction? Or did Whoopi handle the situation exactly the way a veteran host should? Drop your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic celebrity moments like this, moments where the script flips and the tension rises, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like the video, and share it with someone who loves unforgettable television moments. Because on Stage View, the drama is always just beginning.